G'day everyone, it's Justin and Tones here from BEEFitUP Australia, and we're here with a very special guest here today, John Licato from Wakool.
Thanks, mate.
It's great to be back up here. It's been
last time when you were up here, you actually caused a bit of a stir in town. It was one of the best nights we've had in Wakool for a long time.
I have heard this.
No, it was great.
Do we want to go into that one, or we're keeping it a bit PC today?
Well, it's up to you guys. But that was a great night. And I love what you guys are doing. It's terrific. It's actually creating a bit of a linkage back to the city, to the urban areas, which is something that's sadly missing in most of what we do. As time goes by, it seems to be that there's more of a divide between the rural and urban areas, and I think it's a bit of a shame because a lot of people in the city just don't understand what we do anymore, and it's a shame.
You'd have a fair idea about that because you're third generation out this way, aren't you?
I certainly am, yeah. My grandfather came out in 1927.
Yeah. I'm led to believe came over with his brother, and when they landed on the shore only had 5 bob in the pocket. Does that sound about right?
That's about right.
No, this because I read the family book just before. So.
Yeah, look, it was really interesting, to have actually had that foresight and to actually have the guts to actually do it in those days. You could imagine that they wouldn't have known much about Australia. Land of kangaroos and bloody, people that mainly all convicts and things, and what they did, because especially after the war over there, they decided they're looking for an opportunity for their families. And the way it worked in Italy at the time was that when you had sons, then the blocks of land you split up between. So if you had 3 sons, you split that block of land in 3. And so my grandfather and his brother, they already owned about, I think it was about 7 or 8 blocks between them. But they're all small blocks, one on this side of the valley, one on that top of the hill, one somewhere else. And you could see that there was no real future in the way it was going. Fairly rocky, undulating, well, not undulating, rocky country in the mountains. And so what they decided to do, they sold everything they had. The 2 brothers got together, sold everything they had, kept the house in town, and both of them, it just so happened they married 2 sisters. So the 2 brothers married 2 sisters.
That's handy, isn't it?
And so what they did, they shifted the women into town, into one house. My grandfather had 3 kids at the time, and my grandfather's brother, he also had 3 also, and they sold everything they had, and they actually had enough money to buy 2 tickets to on a ship coming out to Australia. And the funny part about it, well, I don't think it's too funny, I know what my wife says, both the women were pregnant. So the boys jumped on their boat on it was a passenger liner and a bit like a cruiser, and as they were heading off, they said, "See you later, girls, we'll send for you." Both of the girls are sitting there with these screaming young kids, two ovens in the bun, and so they both.
And they never saw him again. So there you go.
Yeah, well, almost. It was 6 years.
Right.
Because when they first got to Australia, couldn't speak English, of course, and but they're pretty quick learners, both of them. They travelled around and did whatever they could, and of course they came out in the Depression, so you can imagine how hard it was to get work and stuff. But they started down in Gippsland and just picking peas, cutting firewood, whatever else they could do. And then eventually a friend of theirs or an acquaintance of theirs had moved down towards Barham, and this was after the 2nd year they were here, and they said, land of opportunity down around Barham, come up.
Yeah.
So the boys hitched the ride or walked, or I think they spent most of the time walking, but they worked all the way down, got here to Barham, and they started in Barham originally. They had a little block just out of Barham, and then eventually they moved out here and share farmed this for a few years until they earned enough, just growing tomatoes, vegetables, whatever else they could.
Oh, beautiful. And so how big's your property out here, or what did they start?
They started on 800 acres, because originally being...
So just a very small, almost like quarter-acre block, that, isn't it?
Well, compared to the places around us, it is, but because this area ended up being soldier settlement blocks, first of all, after the First World War, and this block was after the First World War, and then the Second World, after the Second World War, a lot of this region, the Wakool Tulakul region, was a big station called Tulla Station, and the government, what they do when they get it back off the leasees, and they split it up into, it was a 60,000 acre station that actually got broken up into sort of anywhere from 800 to 1,500 acre blocks. And of course that's where the rice industry started out here too, because it was at that around about the same time in 1942. There was an internment camp just up the road at Deniliquin, and they used the labour. Actually, it happened to be an Italian internment camp, and they actually used that labour to develop this area into. It was the biggest single rice plot in the world, and it probably still stands at that because it was. They actually completely laid all the country out and grew rice for the war cause.
Oh, there you go.
So that's where the irrigation is.
Right there.
Well, that's where the irrigation started in this region, and it was mainly due to the the engineers set it up. It was the labour of the internees that actually they weren't locked up like they because my grandfather and that was naturalised at that stage, coming out in 1927, but they were here in 1930, and so occasionally the boys would come down and have a bit of yarn, and then they just wanted to back up to Deniliquin again. So there is a lot of history in the area, and it's pretty important to actually make sure that the next generation understands a bit of that too, because it wasn't as if somebody decided, got a pin and just said, right, we want to have an irrigated farm here. There's a lot of planning went into it, and this country in particular, very limited rainfall. We can grow just about anything you like. We've got good soil, good rainfall, good soil, good weather as far as plenty of sunshine, but what we haven't got is our rainfall's very limited, and so our forefathers decided, well, we better set up an irrigation area. And so in the 1940s onwards, really probably 1950s, this area ended up becoming one of the first major irrigation areas of the region. And so all gravity. There's not many places in the world, there's people around the world that have cut off the right arm to be tied up with the type of irrigation we've got, because you start at the top end, one bit of energy, pull a door at Yarrawonga, that same bit of energy you use to open that door and let that water flow will travel over 750,000 hectares.
Right.
Without using any more energy. And that's the crazy part about where we are now. We've got governments and others all saying that you need to have pressure pumps, and you need to have centre pivots, and centre pivots okay, but more so pressurising your water. That's using energy for starters. It's increasing the cost, whereas before, like the water that's coming out of the channel there now is gravitated. So it just from Yarrawonga all the way through to here, no energy required. And we're gradually shutting that down and shifting it downstream to horticulture and other places where they pressurise the bloody stuff. They go and store it up on country that should have never had water stored on it, and it's now becoming to the stage that it's becoming very inefficient in the fact that it costs so much to put it out on a paddock to grow your food and fibre. Whereas with us, the food and fibre, water wasn't a huge cost in the fact that it was didn't cost much to actually once the channels were built, which through the depression
took care of itself.
That's right.
And so with the allocation, all the issues that have been going on lately, how are you affected with all that? On this farm in particular?
Yeah, look, it's I'm a bit tied up with the water job, and it's one of the things that when you see something that's absolutely crazy, you try to do something about it to try to change direction on it. The problem is that with the water debate the way it's gone now under the Basin Plan since 2012, the whole thing revolves around political targets and political imperatives. It doesn't revolve around what's best for the forest or what's best for the commercial interests, or it's all revolving around political interests. And because South Australia has got marginal seats down there, everything tends to revolve around getting water to the bottom end of the system. Now our system, the Murray system, is not a huge system. Like the Murray River itself is actually relatively a small channel. The most restrictive point of the whole lot, which is the Barham choke, you would have heard all of us, you're both talking about that at times. But 7,000 megs a day, 7,200 megs a day through the Barham choke That's the most you can get through there before it actually tips into the forest. So it's actually quite a small river. And to actually try to force that water all the way down to the other end of the system, so you can force it out through the lower lakes, through the evaporation ponds down there and out to sea, just doesn't make a lot of sense. And what's happening, the reliability that we had here, we used to have somewhere around about 86% reliability, so every year we get roughly 83 to 86% of our entitlements. That's now dropped to about 46 or 48%. And all because our reliability is actually being shifted into other areas. And of course, part of irrigation farming is planning. Part of good farming is planning ahead. I used to be able to plan, 2 or 3 years in front. I'd know I'm going to grow. I used to use rotations all the time, 4 to 5 to 6 year rotations. And I'd know that I was going to grow rice there in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, and I was going to do, grow vetch in this paddock and grow clovers in that paddock. Now we don't have any idea at all until, because October is when we usually get our allocations, and we've got no idea until October comes around, and you might get, we started off with 3%, I think it was. So it's really hard. It's really hard to make any forward planning. And
going to flood a lot of paddocks to get rice out of that, aren't you?
And the crazy part about it, what our bureaucrats and a lot of our urban public don't realise is that rice, and as much as I hate to say it, because I don't like talking much, but as much as I hate to say it, those two crops are probably the most suited to the Australian climate. Because if the water's there, we can use it, and if it's not there, we don't. And that's the way our allocation system used to work, in the fact that the allocation was reflective of what was happening in our environment. The water in the dams, we got it. And plus we used to be able to get, we used to go over 100% a lot of the time. All because if the rivers were flooding and we've already got hydraulic loading on our land, so we can't overuse it on our land, we could go up to 130, 140%. Whereas nowadays, you're almost put in jail if you talk about going over 100%. And whereas in other years, it gets to the stage that the allocation is the backbone of our forward planning. And of course now we haven't got that. I can grow, you only need 2 or 3 weeks really to actually decide what you're going to do with the crop. But it gets to the stage that you're always rushing it, and it's never done as well as what, if you can forward plan.
Peace of mind of forward plan.
A lot of high risks involved, I assume.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And it's not, it doesn't worry me too much, it's the next generation, and that's why I have been involved in the water debate, mainly because I'm more concerned about what the next generation, how they're, we do need irrigation here, in this country. We do need irrigation to be able to, achieve the productive returns on the country we've got. And not only that, we do look after the environment. Every day of the week, we live this life, and that's what people in the city don't understand either, is that the rivers, the creeks, the forests around us, that's our playground. And so we care about that more than what anyone does. And we wouldn't do anything to harm it. And so I think it's...
There's not too many people out there that could say they've lived in the one spot in a family for the best part of 100 years as well. That sort of shows how much you love the area and don't have any intention of actually leaving. And your son's, I think we heard about the tractor just before, so it's going to keep going for another few decades at least.
Part of that though too, you really do need to go out and have a look around. There's no good just Dad did it, that's what I'm going to do. I travelled around for quite a while. I've been overseas a few times, and I actually worked around Australia for 18 months. I tried as many different jobs as I could. I was a mechanic originally, but I tried as many different jobs as I could to make sure that farming is what I wanted to do. And 21 different jobs in 18 months. And when I worked for somebody, I always made sure I stayed for as long as I could to pay that person back. But everything from diving for crays up around Cairns to catching chooks in Darwin. So, but each one of those, I could make a lot more money in other places, but it was really good to get a bit of grounding. My son did the same. He's only for the last 3 years made a commitment to come back to the farm. Before that he was working in the mines, and as he said, if I come back, am I going to get the same? I said, listen here, Teddy Bear, that's one thing, the money you're earning up there, you won't be getting that down here. And he's proven he's really committed to the land, and he's actually committed to the environment the way the rest of us are. So I think that's important, succession planning and moving forward, that you've really got to have a feel for what you're doing. Yeah. So it's yeah, no, it's a good area. It's got a lot going for it, but we do need irrigation in the area, and it's because otherwise you go back to station days. You know, and it's not so much for people like me. I've got water entitlements. I can sell them. I can make a lot of money, and I can head off in the sunset. But it's not about me. It's about the next generation having the same opportunities as what we have.
And now, what are your crops?
Well,
current moment.
Bloody
Because
hell.
I don't think it's rice anymore, is it?
No, it is rice. It is still rice.
rice.
Rice is still one of our backbone. But since Matt's come home, we've got favour beans in. We've got vetch in, mainly for hay and for we have sheep and we haven't got any cattle at the moment. But usually we have cattle also. But wheat, canola, barley, and rice is our main summer crop.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's another couple of now that actually that tractor here in the background, that's another property that Matt's just bought, and he's hoping to put corn in there and maybe even teff one of these days, because one of our neighbours up the road is growing teff.
Yeah.
And he's yeah, pretty keen to get a few of us local yokels growing it too.
Beautiful.
So we've got John up there in his ute with Flemo in the passenger seat. We've just had a good old yarn about what goes on out this way, and we're going to go have a look at a bit of his crops now. Oh, puppies, do you see the puppies in the back of that ute? I think you do. So here we go, we're going down one of his little laneways. We're going to go check out the rice paddies and some beans as well, which we're told that they're actually just about getting ready for harvest, and so they actually blacken off at that point. So we're told that they don't look that pretty at the moment, but they're going to be delicious. And it's the first time they've done this crop actually, and John's boy actually came up with the idea of sowing these ones, so it's all a learning curve for them, but they reckon they've come up with a pretty bloody good crop. So we'll get down here and have a little bit of a look-see. Oh, it looks like we're here already. There you go. So believe it or not, that is not a dam. That is all rice. So how do you get 5 houses into one?
Quite simply, put them on a farm.
Yeah, rightio. So you were just telling us here that there was 5 houses in this vicinity, and you're one now, aren't you?
Yeah, well, when my grandparents first came out, we touched on that earlier, back in the 30s, they mainly just grew vegetables on this place, tomatoes. Then they went from there to broom millet. They even had to go at cotton. So in those early places, they need for a fair bit of labour. And so down Lollicoto's Lane, the lane just come down.
Yep.
There's 5 houses down it, and another house. We actually had 6 houses on this 800 acres. Now there's just main house that's left. And
sort of one just behind us there as
well,
well.
that was my grandparents. Out of all the red gum and whatever else. As you can see, looked after for quite a few years, but it's gone down. Whenever you see a palm tree out, there was actually a house right beside that palm tree. Just goes to show how tough palm trees are, because we've had probably over the years since the 50s, we've probably had a dozen rice crops here, and it's still survived.
Yep. So do we just walk in there and just start grabbing rice? Is that how this works?
Go for your life.
Can you really?
Well, you like to see. You have the aeroplane flying overhead and dropping the rice out of the aeroplane into the flooded paddocks. So there's a couple of beautiful bits of rice that the galahs and cockatoos love to come along and pick up after we've finished sowing. But so that gets dropped into the paddocks.
Yep.
We pre-germinated to start with. We actually put it in water and say pre-germinated, get a little shoot on it, drop it out of the aeroplane, and yeah, so that's what you get later on. But as you've probably noticed, it's a tropical crop. The weather what we've got at the moment isn't the most conducive to rice.
Not, yeah. Wearing this t-shirt wasn't the greatest idea.
But yeah, so that's it's about 3 weeks. So it's actually getting away now, but we would really love a bit warmer weather at the moment.
Yep.
And that's one way of growing rice. The other way is direct drilling it. So we actually just drill straight into the paddocks, and then we flush the paddocks. We do 50-50, half rice. Sorry, half aerial and half direct drill.
Lovely.
Rice is to our environment. That water, let's go all the way from there. So it's gravitated.
Yep.
One bit of energy, pull a door at the top end, let the water flow, and as it's flowed through all the different structures, it's gravitated all the way down to here.
So what have we got here, John? This isn't a dead paddock, is it?
No, exactly. It's my son talked us into having a go at growing favour beans, and I've never grown. They're at a stage where they're getting pretty close to harvest.
Yep.
They actually look really good when they're growing. They're quite spectacular crop when they're growing.
Yep.
But looking at it now, it looks like something's a bit of disaster area almost.
I reckon so.
But no, they told me that's what they were supposed to do. They're actually a wonderful stock feed. But as you know, if you've already tried chewing,
give it a go.
You,
They'll be all right like this, I'm assuming. Yeah.
Yeah, but don't chew too hard.
Oh, very good.
There is tough.
I'll lose a feeling that could probably take its place, I reckon. You cannot go through that. So how do you cook these up from this point? What would be the application for cooking, I assume?
No, not for cooking. No, these are stock feed mainly.
So and for also, the old sheep.
For sheep. Yeah, but also they do crush them, and there's you can make it's like a protein out of them, like flour and things out of it.
Yeah.
But
so definitely don't sit on the couch and watch an episode of Friends and.
No, because you won't have any teeth.
I'm determined to bloody get through, but it's not going to happen though.
I really don't know how sheep eat them actually. They do. They actually develop a taste for them, and they do exceptionally well on them.
Beautiful.
Full of protein.
So how do you harvest this from this point? Run a header over it?
Yeah, just a header. Yep, just a header. And it's just as you can see, pods break open pretty easily.
Yeah.
And then load her in your truck and take her off to whoever. Probably take it to the local grain yard.
Yep. All right, we're belting down the dirt track now. Still chewing on my little bit of bean. Got told you can suck on them for quite a while and then they break up in your mouth. Probably don't try it. You don't really benefit too much flavour-wise, but we're going to go down and have a look at paddock full of canola now. And I know that does taste a little bit better. Well, in its final form, in oil or in butter to a certain extent. So let's see what it's like in its rawest form. Just following John and Flemo down an even dirtier dirt track now.
This is our canola paddock.
I thought it was meant to be yellow. What's it going here? You farmers have been lying to us for years, haven't you?
If you had been here about 6 weeks ago, that would be just one sea of yellow.
Yep.
There's 100 hectares in here, and to get some footage from the air with the drone or whatever else, it actually stands out beautifully. So once it's flowered, then it goes into the pods, and this is what we've got now. Is the little pods, and of course all you've got to do that and you end up with a lovely little black seed.
Oh yeah.
Now that black seed's full of oil and and that's what we get paid on. You get paid extra for the oil content.
Yep.
43% or 40. You want to be about 46% if you can. So it's it's a good crop. It's really good for us. In fact, it's for rotation. It's got a really quite deep-rooted plant, and so it opens up your soil, and that root can go down a fair bit. So we actually plough that in, and actually not only acts as a break from your cereals, it also gives you more aeration in the soil because of it being deep-rooted.
Beautiful. Obviously, canola oil, butter, other applications that's used for. Where does yours usually end up? A silo, possibly back of a truck.
No, well, we take it over to either Mathara or Deniliquin.
Yep.
And that's when they actually assess each sample gets sent away. It gets assessed for the amount of fertilizer.
Yep.
We get paid a premium for the oil content. But it's, there's numerous uses for it. But, stock feed, even once it's been crushed for the oil and that, it makes really good stock feed.
Right.
Use that stock stuff, bale it up. It's pretty tough, but cattle and others can actually utilise. We won't do that. We'll just plough this back in because it actually
for puppies.
Yeah, good organic stuff for back in the soil.
Beautiful.
But it's mainly a break crop, and this year in particular, we're actually going to make a few dollars out of it because it's probably because there's been, like most things we do in Australia, we rely on some disaster overseas, and because some of the main canola growing countries like Canada and a few of the others haven't had real good crops over there.
Yep.
The world demand for it's fairly high, and so we're probably almost double what we normally get for it.
Right.
So it's a nice little bonus this year.
So I sort of just struck lucky in the end there.
Well, without
to a certain extent.
And what you're seeing here is this crop's been windrowed. The idea of that is because the pods are actually, once they dry out, they're fairly fragile.
Yep.
And so you try and the crop will come in a little bit like some places a bit green. So to try to bring it all in together, you get a windrower in, which actually cuts it, puts it into these rows.
Mm-hmm.
And so now even if we do get rain or windy days and that, it's not so bad. It's all sitting in the one spot. It's ready to be harvested now.
Yep.
As you can see, well, the way we crushed it before, it's getting quite fragile. So we could have got into this the last couple of days. We're just waiting for the moisture to be right.
For us to get here.
Yes, exactly. The only problem is Huey decided to set a bit of moisture down, so we're not able to harvest it today.
Okay, so there's two bits you can eat here. This is predominantly for stock, isn't it?
Go for your life. It'll actually be an all-day sucker if you want to chew on it. And
really? But here's what typically, that's what turns into oil and butter and other good stuff. So let's chuck that into the cake oven. Went down the throat. Out of all the things that I've eaten so far with beef, that's probably the best. I'm not doing this out. Yeah, bugger it.
You don't know what it's like unless you taste it.
Right, until it's not that bad, really, is it? There you go. Just break into a farmer's paddock, and you got something to chew on for half the day.
Now, last time we met, John,
Wakool.
2 years ago.
Great night.
What happens in Wakool stays in Wakool. I learned.
Some of it.
But that was and personally speaking, that was one of my favourite experiences in comedy and all that, because we brought a whole town together.
Yeah.
It felt like everyone turned up for the 2 days. Everyone had a great time. Everyone shared their experiences. But everyone was like, that show in particular is to bring laughs to the town that's been affected by drought and things like that. For yourself, how are you in the last year with the drought? How are you finding the issues within the region? Is there a good support base where people are heading out to each other and actually keeping a check on each other?
Yeah, look, that night was in the fact that it came at just the right time too, because we were going through a very tough time, and people were feeling a bit isolated, and bringing everyone together and made people realise that not just by myself, And yeah, no, it was a terrific night, and as you know, we spoke about it for weeks, months after it, because it was something that you didn't have to do it, and it was you know, just more of a type of spur of the moment type thing, and yeah, no, it was terrific, and that's what makes these regional areas is the fact that everyone looks out for each other, that you know, you bounce off each other, if one's a bit down, and you actually, you know, usually go to the you know, whether it's a pub or you know, school outing or something, and you rub shoulders a bit, but then it was actually getting to the stage of a lot of people just, you know, wallowing in their own, yeah, pity, I suppose. Not pity, but it was a pretty tough time. But where we are now, look, I'm just really concerned that the way government's now handling the water debate and some of the issues that it's about divide and conquer. And I've never, because, you know, I've been fairly heavily involved with a lot of community groups and also, you know, representative groups and whatever else. And I've never come across it as bad as what it is now. And I think, look, I blame the NDBA for a lot of this, because what's happened is that over the years we used to have public meetings, and at those public meetings you know, we'd have our main community representatives would actually speak up at these meetings, and they could go head to head with any of the government agencies that were there if they said something that wasn't quite right or wasn't reflective. And then the people at the meeting could see you know, your community leaders, you know, defending their position. Whereas I think what's happened recently when I talk about the last 18 months, 2 years, a lot of government agencies, NDBA in particular, won't have a public meeting, and part of the reason they won't do that is because they knew that they couldn't win the debate against common sense and logic.
Yeah.
And of course, anything when you're talking about logic and common sense, we used to shoot them down just about every time. So over a period of time, they've gradually decided that no, we're not having public meetings anymore. We'll just handpick our meetings, and then they will pick people that are, you know, they'll have a meeting over here, and they'll let people that do know their stuff go head to head with them, expose them for the mistakes and for the propaganda at times, you know, like sandslides heading down the river and stuff like that. Okay, there's some basis behind it, we all agree with that, but instead of being able to have a proper debate, they've cut that debate off by having the knowledgeable people in the room with them, and that's it, and the community
Logical.
the community doesn't get to see the other side of the argument.
Yeah.
And so what that is doing, that's breaking down the representative structure that our communities rely on, because there's not many people that would go out and read reports and studies and go to all the meetings that you know, that probably some of us gooses do. But if you're going to do something, I've always had the belief you've got to do it properly, and so I do try to keep up with what, you know, report studies and media and all the rest of it. And so it is my role to make sure that I do know my stuff if I'm going to be up there representing community. What's happened, as I said, the MWA started it, and now there's quite a number of government agencies that are doing exactly the same. They're actually trying to move away from having representative groups, you know, in these public forums.
Yeah.
And to me, what that's doing, that's now creating division within our communities, because there's still a lot of money available under the basic plans, $4 billion there, and that money is being used. And look, I use the analogy of the fact that you know, it's a bit like shiny beads and mirrors, and it's being offered to, you know, that they're usually very careful about who they handpick. It's usually a peer in the area, somebody that might get you know, quite a bit of a benefit out of it, whether it's building a bridge, whether it's, you know, putting you know, levy banks up in the right place or whatever else. They go to them directly, and without others knowing what's going on, they get them on side. And of course, then when you do have your representative groups, then you've got division within your own banks. And of course, when younger people see that division starting in your own representative groups, and they all, you know, they don't really want to have too much to do with it. And so what's happening now, we're actually got divided communities. And that is what makes these areas, why people have always wanted to come to regional areas, is because we all back each other up, you know, like we look at.
Yeah.
And what they don't want to see is when, you know, people bluing amongst themselves.
And that's one of the huge attractions to living in a country is community. And get rid of that. Why would you live in the country if it's as bad?
And that's it. Your local footy club is also the hub, and you know the pub is at the 100%. Same time, and you know the farmers, if they have a good year. I've been from country towns myself. the farmers have a good crop that year, might better have a couple of bobs to splash around the footy club and get some good players. Might have a good year in footy, and that's where everyone sort of gets to.
That's the first question I asked.
It's a morale.
Do you have the footy club?
Oh yeah.
Tell the health.
Well, Wakool, we've actually shut it down now. It's a damn shame. It's because of mechanisation and all the rest of it. Like the neighbour buys out the next neighbour, and so the farms have gradually got bigger and bigger. So instead of them being farm settlement blocks like they were originally, and one family on each farm, now the average would be probably most of us probably got 3 and 4 farms. And of course, big blokes might have 10 to 15 farms. So what's happened is that when you drive down the road here now, you can probably, every farmhouse that you go past, there's probably one family remaining out of probably four or 5 houses.
Yeah.
So the numbers have dropped off. We fought like buggery to keep the Wakool Footy Club going, and it did shut down one year. It came back the next year with a heap of vigour, and a lot of money was thrown in. Well, we earned our money. We just have the sheep races, the fishing competition, all these community events, which what brings us all together. And we still do them. We still do try to hold them. But the problem is we just couldn't get enough locals that were able to keep playing footy. And so the footy club has closed down, and it's taken, like, that's the heart and soul of the community gone. But we've still got the bowling club.
Oh, there you go.
I'm one of these
that's your generation now, isn't it?
As much as I fought it, I've ended up having to start to play bowls, and I really enjoy it too.
Beautiful.
But it's so we've got our bowls, and we've still got our tennis club is just still ticking over.
Well, yeah. I think that sort of leads me into the final question here, because we're sort of seeing where this one's going. What does community mean to you? We got a bit up and about there, so I'm interested to hear what that one is now to finish this off.
Look, community is everything. That's what makes it worthwhile, because it's, while I love farming, while I love growing food and fibre and doing the stuff I do, it's having your neighbour up the road, and it's having, you go to town and those people that are there, and it's community's what we revolve around. And you start knocking up, anything that actually has an impact on your community sort of comes back on other people. And look, the mental issues, like this COVID has been a real challenge for a lot of us. At the same time, I'd much rather be living here than living in the city, because you poor buggers...
agree with that one?
Well, you poor buggers, the stuff you've had to deal with there has been unbelievable. So we have had that advantage in that respect. But now that it's opening up, of course, we are in the middle of, shutdowns and all the rest of it. But no, community is what these regional areas revolve around, and it's the most important thing we've got. And that's why I love what you guys are doing, because trying to break down that where we started, trying to break down the divide between the urban areas and the regional areas. That's our biggest challenge, I think. I think it's and when people come down here, like, that's why even farm stays and things like that, I think I really want to try to encourage more of that, to get people out of the city and come and live on a farm for a bit, and see what happens down the paddock and that side, and then it gives you an appreciation for what we do. Because at the moment it's all negative, especially when we talk about climate change and like all those cows farting over the paddock, they're causing all this methane, and get a grip on it. For God's sake, it's the few cows out there farting, like, that's okay, they might poke a bit of methane out, but think about the bloody aeroplanes that are flying over us every day of the week. And I'm not a denier in climate change, but at the end of the day, let's just deal with the issue as it comes up, and don't keep on picking out the areas like ours. We're talking about electric cars and stuff. That's great in the city.
Yeah.
Not so flashy out in the country. Not so you hear that tractor running in the background. That's part of what we do. And we do it really well. We're the most efficient farmers in the world, and I think that's where the people in the cities need to be aware of that.
I think what you said there is quite important. Most efficient in the world.
Well, with our rice farming in particular, we've got the best water usage of anyone in the world, not by a little bit, by a heap. Like the Americans, everyone else, we're so far in front of them. It's not funny, because one thing that we do is, if there's some technology out there that we can utilise to actually become more efficient, that's one thing farmers will do. They'll throw everything at it to get it. With me here at the moment, the sun comes back home, we've got to have the GPS up there, and we've got to have a satellite dish here. I said, for God's sake, I've never needed it before. But at the same time, it is really quite, I can see the benefit of it, whereas instead of overlapping, when you're sowing your paddocks, instead of using your iron, you've got to overlap by 30 centimetres or whatever else. now with GPS, we can be within, you know, sort of 30 to 40 centimetres, so you're not overlapping, so you're not wasting your, you know, double sowing, whether it's fertiliser with seed, and now he wants it in the header, and I'm having trouble understanding that one yet, but at the end of the day, the idea is then you get your yield mapping, and then you can actually go and fertilise the paddock, parts of the paddock that need fertilising, and the other parts you don't.
Yeah.
So there's more efficiencies building into it. So, you know, we're at the forefront of technology, and I think I just wish a few more people in the city, and governments in particular, would actually acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Instead of, you know, saying, oh, well, we've got to, you know, shut down dairy farms and we've got to do all, you know, we're such a big nation spread so far apart, we need people to move away from the urban fringe and come inland.
Come back.
And that's what our forefathers did, you know, out at Hillston and all these areas, Torali and all these other places up north from us. They provided irrigation, they encouraged people to go out there. Now what's government's done, they've gone and bought all those big properties, and what they've done, turned it into national park. The water that was there has been shifted somewhere else. Those people that have left there, okay, they've left with a lot of money in their pocket, but now there's nobody there. And so what you've got, everyone's, and of course they've gone and bought their holiday house or whatever else, and they've all moved back to the city.
Yeah.
And then now out in the middle of nowhere, you've got people that used to love what they did, and because
There's no community out there, is there?
well, I can't blame those people, because those people, you know, if somebody comes along and offers you an awful lot of money, and they did fight at the start with, a lot of people did really, you know, say, it doesn't make sense, you know, I'm growing, you know, organic wheat on those dry lake beds that nobody else can do, and, you know, in big areas, and they had their tennis courts and their swimming pools, and, you know, the next neighbour might be, you know, 80 kilometres away. They had a whole social thing that used to revolve around down to different people's places.
Yeah.
Now all that's gone, and it's been turned into national park. Not against national parks are wonderful, but if you have a national park, it's got to be managed.
Yeah.
So creating all these extra national parks, they haven't got enough people there to manage them, and to manage them properly. You know, farmers manage country because that's their livelihood.
Yeah.
And also be very conscious of the environment that's around them, because that's what we do.
Beautiful. Well, thanks a lot for joining us here today.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very insightful.
I definitely learned a few things, to be honest. Yeah.
And also, like with that show we did in Wakool, that was possible because of donations for the 1,000 paddocks. And the cool thing which sucked about Wakool was that weekend got another couple of towns that same weekend, and then we couldn't do it, so we had to do it in other ways. So we didn't get to recreate that exact thing. So get to the page 1,000, adopt a paddock, and we can continue stuff like that and keep bringing a laugh into a town and getting to know people and bringing communities together. So
look, and that's why I love what you guys do, because it really does break down those barriers and you know, put a bit of humour into it, and you know, and the you know, Barham, like nothing better than bringing people together, and that's why that, you know, since then everyone's still talking about it, and it's I think you know, the more support you can get, the better, because if, you know, we've seen the benefit of it, and that's why all of us have kicked the can to, you know, go on
make sure another town gets.
That's right, and especially the smaller towns that you're focusing on, because we, you know, as I said, losing our footy club, that was a real kick in the guts, and fought, but reality's eventually got to take place, and so now that we haven't got the footy club, we're just going to try and do other things in between, and this was, you know, a night like that was does fill a bit of a gap.
Yeah.
So no, all credit to you guys for what you do, taking the time to travel around.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
No worries. No, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, John. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
We'll catch you on the next Meet the Maker.
That's right. Brought to you by the Australian Horizon Foundation's BEEFitUP Australia. 1,000 paddocks. Let's get rural. Time Structure Stories. Chucked it in there. Catch us later.
Cheers.